This is the Chi Codes Podcast with your host, Thomas Dockstader.
So welcome to the first episode of the Chi Codes Podcast. I'm Thomas Dockstader, and after long debate and many sleepless nights, I've decided to start a podcast. I'm doing this for a couple of reasons. I'm doing it in support of a self-help coaching slash self-led business that I have that is really designed to help people through challenging times mentally, physically. The reason for this is I also went through some serious traumatic events throughout my life and got to the point where I was very low and almost took my life, to be quite honest, and was able to get out of it. And I developed a method for myself that worked and got me to a place of where I'm now 7 years sober. I've written a book, and I am putting all of my effort fully into helping others overcome challenges and trauma and really have a life that's more driven towards what they want. So I thought it would be helpful for the first episode to kind of go through my story and bring you all up to speed on where I've been and what I've seen and what's really brought me here to this point, to really having this deep desire and passion to help other people. So I grew up in Salt Lake City, but I was a part of a cult, the FLDS polygamous cult, here in Utah. The leader was, more famously known Warren Jeffs, who was put in prison for several crimes, but ran that notorious cult out of Colorado City. When I was younger in the 80s, there was a large portion of that group that lived here in Salt Lake City, and actually Warren's father, Rulon Jeffs, was the prophet at the time, and he lived up here in Salt Lake, and he actually ran a school for the children that were a part of the church. And I went to that school. And so my dad had a couple of wives. It was unique because we lived in a pretty typical, normal Salt Lake City neighborhood. However, we were, polygamous with the prairie clothing and all those things. So that led for some exciting times growing up and just kind of being really very different than the rest of the people that you're around. But I went to school there, and I had a pretty close contact with Warren Jeffs on a daily basis. He was the principal of the school at the time, and really lived what I thought was a pretty normal childhood. And I came out of it really kind of thinking like, hey, that was pretty normal. That was, there wasn't anything crazy about it. There's lots of good people there. And I thought I was okay. But when I turned 18, I made the decision that I was going to leave the church and moved out of my parents' house and moved into my own place. And I was doing construction, had a lot of experience in construction. So I started doing construction. What I didn't really understand was that, I was deeply programmed with religious beliefs as a child. And so when I left, I really did this, I call it the pendulum effect, where, growing up, we're not supposed to drink or watch TV or listen to worldly music. And the things that I started doing when I left the church was, the full opposite of what I was raised on. So, went immediately into drinking and dating women and drugs and things like that, partying. And through my 20s, I really, 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 was kind of flailing in the wind. I would say the best way to say it. I would go up and down with using drugs and alcohol and in and out of relationships. I got married when I was 19, got divorced when I was 22, got married again when I was 24, got divorced when I was 25. And all this time I'm going in and out of drinking, up and down, with just my job and where to live and things like that. And ultimately what was happening is I was spiraling at a not a rapid rate, but a relatively slow rate. And I kept thinking like, well, if I get a better job, then things will be better. Or if I meet the right woman, then things will be better. Or if I, stop drinking, then things will be better. Well, if I make more friends, things will be better. And I kept like looking for all these things to kind of fill these voids, and none of it seemed to work. I continually repeated the same mistakes over and over and over again, and really got in a position where I was drinking really heavily by my late 20s. And at that time I had ended up getting a girl pregnant, and we ended up getting married, and that's my son, Silas, that I have, that's now 12 years old. But at that time I was extremely uncertain of who I was. And I was kind of just bouncing between all these different modalities of myself, and really couldn't find who I was. And the pain of not knowing that, and the things that I had experienced as a child were haunting me, but not in a direct way. There was subconscious issues that I had, but I was not able to pinpoint them as to where they were coming from. And so when I would experience something challenging, going through a divorce or losing a job or, something like that, I would not have a coping mechanism. And so I would turn to alcohol, I would turn to women, I would turn to, really anything that could pacify me for the moment. I lost my father in my mid-20s, which was really challenging. And then in my late 20s, I got in a fight at a bar, and I got beat up really, really badly, and had a traumatic brain injury, and was in the ICU for a month. And really just, I would take responsibility for all of these things because I was ultimately just trying to find footing, and I really didn't have a foundation. And I was just jumping from one thing to the other to try and find something to stand on solidly. Well, my wife with my son, that didn't end up working out. We ended up divorcing about 2 years after we got married. And I ended up having a 50-50 custody of my son. Well, that's when my drinking got really bad, because any of you know, if you're a parent, parenting is really, really challenging. It's very rewarding, but it is very challenging. And I was dedicated to making sure that I was a part of my son's life. And so I fought really hard to get 50% custody. But with that being said, I also had a massive drinking problem. And I was in sales, and I've been in sales my entire career almost. And sales is a very high pressure job. And the combination of all those things just caused me to really turn to the bottle a lot, to the point where I would say when I was about 33, I was drinking 2, 3, 4 gallons of vodka or tequila per week. Really heavy on the weekends, Thursday to Sunday, I would drink really heavily. And then throughout the week, it would be a little lighter because I was still had a job and had to go to work. But I got to the point where I was drinking so much that I would just shake violently in the mornings if I didn't have any alcohol. And I would go through mini withdrawals at work every day because I was like, I can't drink at work. So I'd go through mini withdrawals every day. And then when I got home, I'd have 5, 6 shots and just kind of numb it all out for a bit. This was obviously not a sustainable thing. And so what happened was I was really at a loss. I felt like I was so alone because I had tried so many things, and the countless number of self-help books that I went through. I was going to therapy, hundreds or even thousands of hours of therapy that I've gone through, and I just for some reason could not find what the problem was. As hard as I tried, I could not find what the problem was. So unfortunately, I get to where a lot of people get to in this world is I got to the point where I was like, well, I just have to end my life because I can't figure this out. And the drinking was no longer fun. It was torture. It was constant torture because if I wasn't drunk, I was shaking and violently ill. And when I was drunk, it wasn't like it was when I was younger, right? It wasn't fun at all. I wasn't going anywhere. I wasn't going out. I wasn't hanging out with friends. And I would just drink and drink and drink, and it would get worse and worse and worse. So, growing up, we didn't have guns when I was growing up. We didn't have them. And I always kind of had this like fear of them, or I don't really know what you would call it, but we just didn't have them around. I wasn't familiar with them at all. Well, I decided that if I was going to end my life, then I think that would be the best way to do it. And so I went out and I bought if you know guns, I bought a 1911 45, really, powerful handgun. And then I bought a safe and I put it all away, and I cause I have my son and stuff. And I just, I was like, hey, when the time comes, then it'll be there. And one fateful night, I just had this thought. I was really drunk, and I had this thought. I'm like, hey, tonight's the night. I'm going to end it all. And, I write a lot about this in the book in great detail. But I couldn't imagine another way. I could not see another way. I felt so lost. I even to the point decided that I was going to do it out on my front lawn, because then somebody would find me other than my family, and it would be easier that way. And it was really a long process, a long thought process. I remember holding the gun up to my head. I had fired it once in the air to see if it worked, because I hadn't even ever shot it before, and it did work, definitely. And I was holding it up to my head, and I remember thinking to myself, well, nobody knows anything about my life. Nobody knows about my finances. Nobody knows about anything in my life. And I have a son. And I said, the least that I could do is at least leave a note and just explaining like, hey, where are things, and how can people navigate my life and at least clean up the mess? That's the least I could do. And I had really bad demons in my head telling me, you're worthless. Do it. Get out of here. This and that. Well, luckily for me, I did not do it that night. But the next morning I woke up and I realized that I had to do something about this. I had to. I was either going to drink myself to death, or I was going to kill myself. And so with that being said, I initially just stopped drinking, and I would go 3 months. That first year I tried to stop drinking, I would go 3 months and then I would fall off the wagon. And then I would go another 3 months and then I'd fall off the wagon. And the fourth time that it happened, I had an epiphany. I went the 3 months and I fell off the wagon, and this now had been a full year of me trying to quit drinking. And what I realized was, I was like, oh my gosh. I'm like, the problem is not the alcohol. The problem is something I can't address because I'm drinking. The solution to my problem has been the alcohol. I've been using the alcohol as a solution. And this hit me so hard, because what would happen is I would go 3 months and I would feel physically better because I wasn't drinking. But then that's when those intrusive thoughts and all that sadness and that trauma that was unaddressed was able to actually get at me, because I could feel. And that's what caused me to go back. And so I realized, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm like, I have to stop drinking so that I can then go and address the trauma. And that was the last time that I drank. That was over 7 years ago, that happened. It was a long process, and I went through, it was a challenging time, but what I decided to do was, I was like, I can't do this. I have to put everything I have into it. So I quit my job. I had a good high paying sales job, and I quit it. And I said, I just am going to put everything I have into this. So for the next 2 years, I didn't go to rehab. I didn't do any of that. And to be quite honest with you, therapy really wasn't helping me. And I had to figure it out for myself. And so I ultimately developed a method in which I did this. And the beauty of it is, I'm now 7 years sober, and I have no issues, no challenges. I don't struggle with alcohol. I could be around it, not be around it. I could be around people who do it. Doesn't matter. I have no desire to do it whatsoever. I have completely cleared that from my system. And that's what my book is about. That's what my programs are about, is to help people not necessarily quit an addictive behavior, but how do you go and address the traumas that are causing you to not have the life that you want? If it's procrastination or overeating or, binge watching or whatever it is, whatever the thing is that's stopping you from being the best version of yourself, it doesn't necessarily have to be a substance that's doing that. And that's the beauty of what I've developed. So what happened was I got sober and I learned meditation. I learned hypnosis. I learned so many things and read so many books. I met Tony Robbins. I met Deepak Chopra. I put everything I had into developing this plan and developing this way to do this. And I lay it all out in my book, but I also created a whole program to walk you through step by step how to do it. You can work one-on-one with me, or you can, soon I'll have a digital product where you can just go and it's all self-led. But the unique thing about my plan is it's not something where I am coming to you and it's this very hands-on, like us going back and forth about your trauma. No, I teach you a method that you can learn and you can self-lead yourself through this program to help you cure your own or heal your own traumas and ultimately have this method to use when new traumas come. And this is a really important piece too, because of course, new traumas are going to arise, right? And so that's the biggest issue with, when we think about people who have had substance abuse issues, the age-old thing is like, well, they're sober now, but are they going to stay sober, right? The alcohol is by far one of the hardest things to quit in this world. Smoking, I was also smoking at the time too, by the way, which I quit that as well. Heroin is a major issue, but drugs in general, alcohol is the most available, and it is the most challenging to quit. And from a statistic perspective, only about 5% from the people who start and try to quit, only about 5% go the rest of their lives without using again, without a relapse. So a lot of people will try and quit, they'll relapse, and eventually they find some solution, but that's actually only about 30 to 40%, depending on what demographic you're looking at. So the success rate is rather low and very challenging. And so what I want to do is like, how do I help in that realm? Well, I decided that I needed to, one, share my story through my book, but also I think I'm going to use this podcast as a way to help share people's stories of like how they overcome challenges and really create a community that has the capability to share and understand that everyone has the ability to heal. There isn't only one way to do it. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the power within you is the key that's going to help you overcome anything and create what you want. And that's where I really drive and push people that I work with to understand is that everything is within you, all of it. You have the capability, and I show you how to unlock it. Now, you might be saying, well, that's all great and that's good, but how do I know it's going to work for me or this or that? Or maybe you just, haven't really dealt with anything since you got sober. So what's wild is this: after I got sober, that's when I really started to have challenges. When I was about 2 years sober, I had this idea. I was single, and I was like, man, I want to manifest a woman, because I've never done that. Every time I've been with a woman, they've just kind of been the one that was around when I, and it worked, right? So I decided I'm going to manifest a woman. And so I write down this list of all these things that I want. And of course I live in Utah, and, if you're in your mid 30s and you live in Utah and you want certain things, it's challenging because a lot of people get married very young. So I said, I want someone that's never been married, that has no kids, that's successful and good looking and all these things. And so I wrote all this down, and I put action toward my intention, and I went and gave the list to a matchmaker, and I said, find me this person. Well, the second person that they lined me up with was a woman that was 2 years older than me, never been married, no kids. She was a PhD professor. She owned her own orchard, and she was beautiful. She's Miss Teen Utah, and she liked me. Like, we hit it off. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I'm the greatest manifester in the world, because I was able to make this happen. Well, she told me very shortly after we started dating that she's like, hey, look, I'm getting older, and I've dedicated my life to my career, and I really want to have kids. So if you're not interested in having kids and getting married, then, we probably should part ways. And I was like, no, I'm all about that. I'm down. I'm ready. And so about a year after we met, we got married. And about 2 months after we were married, she was pregnant with a little girl, which I was absolutely over the moon about. So freaking happy. I couldn't have been more happy about what was about to come. I love kids. I love my son, and I would have loved to have had a daughter. But about 8 months into the pregnancy, she ended up losing the baby. We had to go through the full birth, and we had a funeral, and we named her, and that was such a challenging time in my life, because I had all this stuff that had happened that was so good. And then it was kind of all getting taken away from me. And shortly after, for, many reasons, we ended up not staying married, and we got divorced. And then shortly after that, I had lost my job. So in about a 4 or 5 month period, I lost the baby, lost my wife, lost my job. What a time for someone who was only a couple of years sober to go back to drinking. What an excuse that you could use to go back to drinking. You basically experience the 3 hardest things in life: loss of someone, loss of your job, divorce. So all 3 of those things happened at once. And I had such a great excuse to go back to alcohol. I didn't, because I had established this method of learning how to understand trauma when it comes, and how to use it, and how to process it, and then how to leave it. And I did not go back to drinking. I did not fall off the wagon. I did not lose my mind, as they say. I actually excelled. I got a new job, and I ended up doing better and better, and digging deeper into self-development. And while that was a challenging experience, it was a lot of great lessons that were learned, and stuff that you really can't ask for that kind of a lesson. It's pretty incredible when you shift your mindset from something, really horrible that happens, to something that it's an opportunity, or it is a learning experience that can make you better as a person. So I went through all of that. And at this point, I had written a book. I was really on a great path from a perspective of understanding who I was, but I felt like there was like something missing, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And the thing is, I was doing everything I was supposed to be doing, right? Like I was waking up early, I was working out, I was eating a healthy diet, I was meditating, I was reading good books, I was developing relationships, I was spreading a good word, but there was just something that was missing. And so after a few years, about a year ago, when I was 6 years sober, I had heard about ayahuasca years and years ago. I saw it on a YouTube video, and this guy was talking about how it changed his life and this and that. And so I knew about it, but for some reason, like, it was almost like the medicine was like calling to me, because it kept coming up. I would see it everywhere. it was wild. People would talk to me about it, and I had never talked to them about it. I never brought up that subject. It was like it was coming up so much. And I didn't know what it was, but I felt this massive draw to go do it. So I started researching, and I found a place down in Costa Rica that does it, and they do it small group sizes. So 8 people only for the whole time you're there at the resort. There's only 8 guests. I looked it up, and finally as I was booking it, I was like hesitating, because I'm just like, do I really want to do this? And it was just like something inside me, something deep inside me was like, do it. So I booked the trip. Well, 3 days later, 3 days after I booked the trip, I booked it this was in May, and I booked it for August. 3 days later, I got laid off from my other job that I had for 3 years previous to the one before. I got laid off. They had mass layoffs, and I got laid off. So for me, that was like a sign and saying like, hey, go do this. Don't have anything to think about but this. So I ended up moving it up to June. And so I went down to Costa Rica, and the resort that I went to, you're there for 7 days. You do 3 ceremonies in 7 days. For those of you that don't know, ayahuasca is basically it's a thousands of year old tradition that the shamans of Peru have done and developed for thousands of years. It's a root and a leaf that are combined together, and how they came up with that combination is just incredibly who knows? It's been around for thousands of years, but they combine two specific, a root and a leaf, and they combine it. They boil it for days and days and days, and they create this syrupy like tea that you drink, and it takes you on this incredible journey. So I get there, and the first night that I go down to do it, we walk into the big Maloka. It's like a big teepee type thing. And the shaman is sitting there, and it's very serious, and he's got all of his stuff laid out in front of him. And it was a little spooky, but it was kind of almost reassuring at the same time. And I sat down and I had I didn't know what I was trying to get out of this. This is the point I'm trying to make, is I had no idea what was missing, but I knew something was missing. And I had this deep feeling that the medicine was going to help me out with this. The first night I did 3 cups. So you drink a cup, and then you sit there for an hour, and you kind of wait. Everybody's quiet for about an hour. Then the shaman opens it up and says, hey, you can have another cup if you'd like. So basically with the dosing, you determine if you're going to have 1 cup, 2 cups, 3 cups, 5 cups, whatever it is, you determine that. And so they kind of coach you and say like, hey, when the shaman offers cups, talk to yourself and say, do I want another one? Do I need another one? Should I have another one? So that night I had 3 cups. That night, the best way I can describe it is it was just pure chaos. It was pure chaos. I saw people from my past. There was just a lot of chaos and turmoil, and it was really hard to kind of put together what actually happened. It was a very strong psychedelic trip, very strong. When it was over, I was really let down. Because I was like, what was that? What happened? And then I was kind of like, well, now I know what ayahuasca does. And I don't think it's helping me. But the cool thing is you're there for 7 days, and you're kind of in the middle of the jungle, and you're not going to leave. So, you got to carry it out, finish it. Some of the people there told me, they're like, hey, just understand that every night is going to be different. So I was like, okay. So the second night we do it Monday night, and then we do it again Tuesday night. So you do it one night, and then you do it again Tuesday night. You go from 7 to 1 in the morning. So the second night we do it, the first night I felt like it was really like externally focused. I was very externally focused. And so I was like, I'm just going to lay on my mat and go inside. I'm just going to go inside. And so the second night, I took 3 cups again. And the second night was like, it was like, I felt like I was on the edge of a cliff the whole time. Like I was having experiences, but I felt like something major was going to happen, but it was right there, and it didn't. And when it ended, I went and talked to the shaman, and I said, hey, I'm really frustrated. I want to have a breakthrough, and I feel like I was right there, and nothing happened. And by the way, the thing is with ayahuasca, you can throw up quite a bit. You purge. And they have buckets there and everything. And the first 2 nights, I just dry heaved over and over. There was nothing coming out. I was just dry heaving, and I was like battling with myself really hard, like just battling and dry heaving and just struggling. And I couldn't purge at all, but it felt like I wanted to, but I couldn't. And what I learned later was that was my psyche, like holding on to a lot of these false beliefs that I had about myself. Well, he said the third night, he's like, I'm going to bring a stronger brew, and we're going to go from 9 o'clock at night till sunrise. And he says, I promise you'll get a good experience the third night. So then we skip a night, and then the next night we do that third night. And the third night, that's it. It's over after that. So we go down, and at that point I was so like beaten up mentally. I had no fight left in me. So I was like, I'm just going to take the drinks and just lay here and just, whatever happens. Finally letting go, finally releasing. And so I took the first cup, and I could tell immediately within, 5 or 10 minutes that it was definitely much stronger than the other stuff that we'd been taking. And when he offered the second cup, I got up and got the second cup. When he offered the third cup, I had to kind of crawl over to get the third cup because I was so out of it. But I was like, I know I have to take the third cup. Once I went and laid down and took the third cup, I was just laying there and this thought came to me. And I don't, this is hard to explain because the medicine, it's you talking to yourself, but it's like the medicine's like talking to you. I don't know a better way to explain it. I said to myself, my dad came to my mind, and he died when I was 24. He came to my mind and I just thought to myself, I was like, I just wanted his approval. And the medicine said he was doing the best he could. And I said, I don't care. I really wanted his approval and I didn't get it. And it's like he was doing the best he could. And I said, I wanted his approval. And it said, you mean like your son wants your approval? And it just stabbed me in the heart so hard. It's like all this realization just flushed my mind. I feel like I'm doing the best with my son, but I certainly could see how my son might think that he doesn't have my approval because I don't voice it the way I should, or I don't make him known or aware of it. And then it helped me understand that my dad was doing the same thing. He was doing the best that he could, and maybe he didn't have the capacity to say the words that he needed to me. Maybe his childhood it like gave me this empathy like you've never felt in your life. A level of empathy so deep that you were just like, oh my gosh. And what I realized at that moment is I'm like, me and my dad are the same. We are the same. We're both trying to do the best that we can with what we have. And I got this huge amount of like love pouring out for my father that I've never felt before. And then I saw my mom, I saw my brothers, I saw my sisters, I saw my close family. And I started thinking like, oh my gosh, they're all experiencing the same thing I am. We're all just trying. We're struggling to find a way, and we're trying to do the best we can with what we've been given. And then it started to expand out, and it went to people in my life, people I work with, and this and that. And it just kept going and going and going. And I was like, oh my gosh, everyone in the world is experiencing this. They're just doing the best that they can. They're trying based on what they've been given. So then I just had the amount of love, I can't even explain it. The amount of love that I had for everyone was just overflowing. And then the medicine like stops me and it's like, Thomas, you can have that level of love for yourself. And I'm telling you, my mind exploded. I was like, oh my gosh, I can give myself empathy and love like that. Like unconditional love and empathy. I couldn't speak. I was so blown away by the simplicity of it, but the realization of how true it is that we are all trying to get that from something. But most of us are not getting it from ourselves. We're getting it from relationships and jobs and money and food and this and that and validation and ego and all these things. We're looking outside of ourselves when it's all in us, every ounce of it. It's all in us. We can all fulfill ourselves. Needless to say, my ayahuasca experience was so incredible that when I came home, I said, how do I help other people get to this place? And I've heard that other people have gone and done ayahuasca, and I wouldn't say that they've had a similar experience to what I did, but I do accredit a lot of the reason that I had what I had because of the work that I had done previous to that. Because of the work that I had worked, I had eliminated a lot of false beliefs about myself, but what I didn't have was that true love for myself. And I decided a year ago, I was like, how do I help as many people as possible get to a place, or at least get on the journey, so that they don't end their lives, so that they don't hurt others, so that they don't hurt themselves, so that they don't live a life riddled with depression and anxiety. How do I help? And so for me, it's all about doing my part in offering some avenue or way or solution or method that someone can use. If it's one person or 1,000 people, it doesn't really matter. If I can get a message out and I can help someone start that path and have some stepping stones in the very beginning. A lot of my program for most people is just, it is the beginning steps of saying, like, how do I start? A long time ago when I was struggling with alcoholism, I was dating someone and it wasn't a long relationship, but they had said to me, you need to work on yourself. And it hit me so hard because I was like, how do you do that? Because these days you see a lot of people go into, fitness, right? And that's like the most, that's like the straightforward, easiest way to work on yourself. You go run, you go lift weights, do these things. It's a physical way to change your body. Right. And a lot of people do get that. But for me, I was like, okay, that's the physical side, but how do you do the mental side? Literally, how do you do? I want step-by-step instructions on how to work on myself, because I went to years of therapy and no one showed me how to like get into my traumas and like understand them and lay them to bed. So I think therapy can work, but it's like, you got to find the right one and not everyone can go to that person. So for me, I did find a way to do that. And so now I want to share that with as many people as possible. And I want to help as many people as possible, find a way to discover themselves. Because what I saw in ayahuasca that was more clear than anything is we've always been perfect, eternal beings. When you come into this world, that's what you are. That's why we all love children. Children are just so innocent and kind and loving. And it's only when we put our ways on them that they become not that, or they believe that they're not that. And it's not intentional. Just like I saw, my dad was doing the best he could. My mom was doing the best she could based on what she had been given by her parents and their parents and their parents and their parents. I saw that it was this generational issue that just kept spilling over to the next generation. And it takes someone to stop it and to recognize it and to start to fix that broken problem that's been plaguing generations. And so I think that there's a way that everyone can go and try to rediscover themselves, because if they discover who they really are, you are a light, loving being. That's what you are. And we just have the world has just made us believe otherwise of ourselves. Everyone is worthy of love. Everyone is perfect in the sense that they have that intuition, that higher self that is within them that always is trying to guide them to the right. But we have so much noise and disruption and disturbance in this realm that it makes it super difficult to do. So I found a way, and I want to share it with as many people as I can. So I hope that you can get something from this. Please watch my podcast, subscribe to my TikTok channel at Thomas Dockstader. My website is thechicodes.com, thechicodes.com, and at Thomas Dockstader with the Instagram. I'm going to have I have a website up now that has trainings available, one-on-one coaching available, meditation trainings. You can buy my book. You can get in contact with me and I'll consult with you in any way I can to help you. Whether it's if you work with me or not, I'll give you all the knowledge that I have, because I just ultimately at the end of the day want to help people. I appreciate everyone listening. There's more to come. I'm going to have as many guests as I can on that are, that have powerful, stories of them going from really dark places to really successful places. If you want to be on my podcast, please contact me at any of my socials. I'm happy to chat with you and discuss, how we can do that. I appreciate everyone listening, and, we will see you soon.